So Dr. Alan Braid, a Texas abortion doctor, purposely conducted an abortion that violated Texas's new anti-abortion law and was sued as a result of it. He even publicized his action in an article in the Washington Post. What's going on here? Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concerns, maybe you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, maybe even click that little bell that will notify you when I post something new. So Texas's new anti-abortion law has gone into effect, basically banning abortions within Texas and stopping the procedure in its entirety in America's second largest state. To add insult to injury, Governor Greg Abbott just signed another law which would basically ban anti-abortion drugs like the morning day pill or RU-486. Texas has basically shown itself to be completely inimical to a woman's right to an abortion. Well, in steps Dr. Alan Braid, an abortion doctor from Texas, outraged over the law, who wrote in an article in the Washington Post that he purposely violated the law in hopes of getting sued. Well, Dr. Braid's wishes were granted. Two disbarred attorneys, neither of them from Texas, one from Arkansas, one from Illinois. Neither of them pro-life activists. In fact, one of them specifically saying in his complaint that he is pro-choice. These two plaintiffs filed lawsuits seeking to enforce the law against Dr. Braid. Now, you might wonder why Dr. Braid felt the need to violate the law so openly and invite such a legal challenge. The reason has to do with civil procedure. Now, if that sounds boring, you're probably right. I had to spend a year of law school learning about it. But let me give you a quick rundown as to its applicability in this case. Courts don't like making theoretical decisions. They like deciding what are considered actual cases and controversies. Real cases where one person is fighting another over a real question of fact or law. Those are the cases where courts can step in and actually rule for one party or another and specifically resolve a dispute. When cases do not have an actual case or controversy in effect, they're usually dismissed as not being ripe. That means that the case hasn't gotten the procedural requirement boxes all checked. That's the reason, by the way, that the Supreme Court allowed the law to go into effect on the shadow docket, a decision that I discussed in another video that I'll post up there. Well, Dr. Alan Braid and these two not pro-life disbarred attorneys have solved that problem. Now there is actually going to be an actual case or controversy that will be in court where the argument as to whether this law violates the Constitution can be tested before an actual court. Now, clearly, this law violates current Supreme Court precedent under both Roe v. Wade and the more recent Planned Parenthood v. Casey that said that states could not put an undue burden onto the women's right to an abortion. That opinion, by the way, was authored by former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. Many of the current justices of the Supreme Court in the conservative majority, particularly the ones appointed by Trump, have been openly disdainful of the Planned Parenthood v. Casey decision. But to simply turn your back on decades of Supreme Court precedent, laws that people across the country have come to rely upon, well, that takes a lot. And one wonders if the Supreme Court is going to be willing to simply strike down this precedent that states have been living under since the early 70s. Ironically, there's a separate case before the Supreme Court right now challenging a Mississippi law that bans abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. That law specifically asked the Supreme Court to strike down Casey and Roe v. Wade. If the court does choose to strike down those precedents under this law, well, then the lawsuits against Dr. Braid probably are moot. But again, under current precedent, the Texas law is clearly unconstitutional, and so Dr. Braid and his supporters certainly have a good argument in court. In the meantime, I have to say I've been enjoying watching the Texas anti-abortion activists' discomfort over the situation with these lawsuits. Chelsea Human, the Texas State Director and National Legislative Advisor for Human Coalition, one of the anti-abortion groups that lobbied for this law, said, quote, "These out-of-state suits are not what the bill is intended for." They hoped, apparently, that there wouldn't be any lawsuits, that instead people would be cowered into compliance with the law for fear that they would be sued. Well, the fact that Dr. Braid was willing to step forward in such an open way just shows how courageous he is and committed he is to the rights of women to an abortion. What's more is the anti-abortion activists, and frankly, I have the same suspicion myself, believe that these plaintiffs are actually plants. You couldn't have better plaintiffs if your goal is to discredit the law. After all, one of them, Oscar Stilley, the Arkansas plaintiff, described himself as disbarred and disgraced lawyer, said he was not pro-life and merely wanted to vindicate the law. The Illinois disbarred lawyer, who's the plaintiff, Felipe Gomez, openly says that he is pro-choice and wants to overturn the law. Well, now that these cases are in court, Dr. Braid and those representing him in the cases, the Center for Reproductive Rights, are going to have the opportunity to raise the arguments that this law is unconstitutional. Their hope, and mine as well, is that courts will find that this law is a step too far, and that explicitly overturning Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, especially in the situation where the majority of Americans support the right to an abortion and do not support overturning these laws, is a step too far and something the courts are not willing to take. If that's the case, then these lawsuits could well turn into some of the most significant cases in the law of reproductive rights. It'll be interesting to see the way they develop. Well, if you agree with me or disagree with me, or if you have any comments or questions, I'd love to see your comments down below. And if you could leave me a like and maybe subscribe to this channel, that'd be a huge help. I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.